Throughout World War II, there were a number of evil German guards and SS men and women that worked inside of the concentration camps. Many of these people had normal lives before they were involved in committing atrocities and executions. The concentration camp system was evil, and following the end of the conflict, dozens of former guards and members of staff were brought to trial for their crimes. But what surprised the judges and the world was the fact that many of the defendants were former doctors who were accused of committing terrible crimes and murder when they should have been looking after people. The most infamous SS doctor, Josef Mengele, managed to escape the hangman's noose, but he spent the whole of his life looking over his shoulder in South America as he was hunted. But one doctor who was condemned to death for the crimes he committed inside of Mauthausen concentration camp was Eduard Krebsbach. But what was he responsible for, and why did he go to the gallows? Join us today to look at the execution of the evil doctor of Mauthausen, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Eduard Krebsbach was born on the 8th of August 1894, and he would in his teenage years want to become a doctor, and he then attended the University of Bonn, and he qualified, obtaining his doctorate in medicine from there. But before the Second World War broke out, he worked as a paediatrician treating children, and he would be someone who in his role should have shown the utmost care and sympathy. But he would be reeled into the politics of the Nazi Party and of Adolf Hitler, and he was a member of the party, but in 1937 he applied for membership of the SS. He was inducted to the evil paramilitary wing of the Nazi Party the following year, and was given the rank of an SS Untersturmführer or captain. Following the outbreak of the Second World War, the Nazis and the SS expanded the concentration camp system heavily, with huge sites being built in occupied countries and across Germany. People from all over Europe were being rounded up and were sent to sites such as Auschwitz, where they were being condemned to death and were exterminated. The SS are remembered today in history for being the most evil organisation linked to the Nazi regime, and they are remembered for being the perpetrators of the Holocaust and the exterminations and executions of millions of innocent people. But in autumn 1941, Eduard Krebsbach was made the garrison doctor of Mauthausen concentration camp. Mauthausen was a notorious and horrific site, which has been considered one of the most brutal and complex of the whole sadistic system. It was found on a hill above the market town of Mauthausen, near to Hitler's hometown of Linz in Austria. It was a site which was linked to around 100 other subcamps, and it held huge numbers of inmates. It's believed that from its time in operation in August 1938 until its time of liberation in May 1945, the 190,000 inmates were imprisoned at Mauthausen, with more than 90,000 succumbing to the evil and brutal conditions. Mauthausen was built near to a granite quarry, so that the inmates could quarry and mine the resources, and then it could be sent back to Germany, where it could be used in huge building projects. But there were also 3 other camps known as Gusen, which held a significant amount of prisoners inside of the complex, and these held more prisoners than the actual Mauthausen main site. But the forced labour that the inmates were made to do was backbreaking and was brutal, and the production output of Mauthausen was higher than even Auschwitz, and it was the most profitable site for the Nazis. A huge number of companies also used slave labour at the site, with inmates rented out for profit, to go and work in different factories for different companies that made things for the war effort. Inside of Mauthausen was even a series of tunnels, which were built near to the site underground, so that the Messerschmitt company could build their planes to produce and create the Messerschmitt Me-262 and the V-2 rockets safe from Allied bombing raids and in secret. The conditions in these tunnels were completely barbaric, but the aim of Mauthausen was to exterminate the inmates through labour, forcing them to work as hard as possible and to make as much profit for the Nazis as possible before they were killed by the conditions. Other inmates who were too sick to work or were too exhausted were sent to the extermination centres, where they were killed by a gas chamber, or others were sent to the doctors at the camp, where they would never return. Throughout the war, Mauthausen continued to receive a steady stream of prisoners, and at times it got so overpopulated that food rations became incredibly stretched and disease also became rife. Mauthausen became known for being incredibly brutal, and the overcrowded huts as well as beatings and abuse from the guards was also evil. The stairs of death was also found at Mauthausen, which was utilised for death and execution. These led to the quarry, and the prisoners were forced to carry heavy blocks of stone up the 186 steps, one prisoner after the other. Many prisoners were shattered, and they would have to do this walk 5 or 6 times a day, and if someone fell, there would be a domino effect, with inmates falling and the prisoners were chased up the stairs by the guards. One former inmate said, "If you stopped for a moment, the SS shot you or pushed you off the cliff to your death." The SS did push prisoners off the cliffs to their deaths, and this was known as a parachutist wall, a sick game where inmates were forced to either push the person in front of them off the quarry or be shot dead. There was also other brutal acts carried out at Mauthausen, with public executions and hangings taking place, mass shootings occurring, and also some bunkers were starved to death. A number of inmates even walked into the electric fence as it was too much, and 3,000 prisoners died from hypothermia, being forced to take icy cold showers, and then they were left outside. There were more doctors than just Eduard Krebsbach that worked at the camp, including one, Aribert Heim, who was known as a Doctor of Death. But at Mauthausen, Krebsbach became known as an executioner and a man who was in charge of supervising medical care and also overseeing all the other doctors and hospital staff. It was he who was responsible for the mass killing of sick and disabled prisoners, and he would administer this execution by lethal injections of phenol to the heart. It was under his watch that 900 Soviet, Polish and Czech prisoners were murdered in this way, and some even had gasoline injected into their hearts. He became known as Dr Injection, and when prisoners saw him, he struck fear into their hearts. He was also the one who oversaw the construction of a purpose-built gas chamber inside the basement of his hospital, so discreetly hundreds of patients could be taken into this room, and they could be then exterminated under his watch. Krebsbach would also at roll call oversee selections of inmates, and these would then be executed within minutes of the selection. One former inmate described his actions during an inspection as a senior SS doctor in the camp, Dr Krebsbach sometimes came to Block 5 and had the still surviving Jews paraded before him. He then asked if any of them were doctors. If they were, he would then complain. The next day they were done away with by the capos. If a Jewish inmate was lying on the floor with a broken limb, a not uncommon occurrence at work, he was usually thrown over a wall by a capo. If Dr Krebsbach was passing, he would say ironically, "Yes, this broken foot is a hopeless case." He was at some point moved to the Kaiserwald concentration camp, based in Latvia in 1943, as it's believed he shot a German soldier. It was alleged this soldier woke Krebsbach up from his sleep, and in retaliation the doctor shot him dead with his pistol. But when he got to the new camp, the selections and executions continued, and Krebsbach forced prisoners to constantly exercise, and 2,000 who were considered the weakest were then selected to be killed. But when the camp closed, Krebsbach transferred to become an army staff doctor, but then he left the army at the end of 1944 and instead took up employment in a spinning mill as a doctor. But at the end of the Second World War he was brought to the Mauthausen Trials, and he was convicted of war crimes. He would tell the courtroom, "When I started work I was ordered to kill or have killed all of those who were unable to work and the incurably sick. Incurably sick who were incapable of work were generally gassed. Some were killed by gasoline injection. I was ordered to have persons killed if I was of the opinion they were a burden to the state. Every state is entitled to protect itself against asocial persons, including those unfit to live. I carried out my work to the best of my knowledge and belief." On the 28th of May 1947 at Landsberg Prison, Eduard Krebsbach was taken from his prison cell by an American military policeman, and he was led up to the gallows which had been created inside the prison courtyard. He was then accompanied by a priest, and he was led up the stairs of the gallows before he was asked any final words. After this he was handed over to the executioner, who placed a cap over his head followed by the noose. He was then shuffled over the trapdoor and was then plunged through, and within minutes this evil doctor of Mauthausen was pronounced dead. Eduard Krebsbach was a brute and a beast, who was responsible for the deaths of thousands of people inside of concentration camps. He was a man who was evil, and who was considered one of the most despicable doctors involved in the whole concentration camp system. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.